Yeah, it's going to be my outlook for the week starting on the 16th of January. So I'm going to start off with the levels that I've got marked out here because that's probably the most important part of the outlook. All the levels are the exact same as what I had last week, except for I've added one more level in across here that comes from a previous monthly resistance. So if you look at it from a monthly perspective, it doesn't look very impactful here. But then as you sort of go weekly, it doesn't look that great, but you start to see the reactions come in. Then once you get to daily, you can see that this has been a sort of area of issue all the way across here. Then we've tapped into it more recently here. So I think on the way down, it's going to be important to watch this. It might not be a full-on rejection level, but it's definitely going to be something that we're going to see sort of issues on the low time frame with. In terms of other levels, I'll just go over sort of quickly. You can see Q2 base here. Above here, we've got monthly support and previous weekly resistance that lines through. Going down to sort of the 4 hours, dailies, we see that's been clearly issues all the way across here. Same here, this just comes from the 4th of May, issues all the way across. Then this is a level that Chris was talking about a lot last year that comes from April. So I think that's as high as I'll sort of explain, because the odds of us getting all the way up here during this week is pretty low. Here we've got the previous monthly resistance. I know there was some chat about this in the live lounge the other, I think it was like 1 or 2 days ago, because some people were looking at this area here and sort of debating whether it was impactful or not. And the reason that I'm looking at the previous monthly resistance rather than the previous weekly is purely based on the most recent reactions that we've seen on sort of the daily and weekly time frame. So I lined it through on the weekly. I won't draw it up now, but when you line it through on the weekly and you compare it to the monthly, you can see that this is the monthly here, and the reactions that we've seen are clearly a lot more sort of a lot more common than we are on the. That's probably the wrong word, but yeah, we've seen a lot more reactions to the monthly resistance than we are to the weekly. So I see this as a much more important level to be keeping an eye on. This level here that I mentioned, reactions all the way across here that comes from the monthly, and that's pretty much it. So talking about scenarios going into the week, I wouldn't really call upside or downside yet because we're at a very impactful level on the monthly. If we were to get below here, I'd like to see daily closes below here, but if we were to see structure on the 4 hour below, that would also give me confidence. Looking at this on the daily, we can sort of see what could potentially turn into a new range with the bottom end of the Q2 base support turning into our mid-range support resistance level if we do keep sort of bouncing around here, because we're bouncing between two monthly levels really when you look at it, with the mid-range support resistance level here, which is quite an impactful level to have right in the middle of a range. Line up right, obviously dead center. So obviously if we do start seeing reactions here, you can start to call this a range, I think. And then obviously, like I mentioned before, I'd like to see daily closes below here or structure on the 4 hour before we start sort of either looking at further downside or the same to the upside here. I'd like to see us above this level on the monthly and weekly, forming structure above before we can start looking at, say, like this level here, this level here. Looking at the actual levels though, again, I don't think it's very sensible to trade within any of these levels here just because of how impactful they are. Like you can see, I've only added one more level since last week, and I can guarantee that the big majority of these levels will still be very impactful, even coming up to sort of maybe even the end of this quarter. So that's it in terms of the levels here. If you did want to trade within them, I'd wait for targets at a minimum. But in terms of the scenarios are one of the less important things in the outlook, in my opinion. I think a lot of people take the scenarios too seriously. I think it's good to be aware of them, but I think you should be more focused on following from a session to session perspective, in line with sort of your 4 hour bias. See, so that's levels, scenarios. Then talking about fundamentals going into next week as well. One of the things I wanted to mention was next Tuesday and Wednesday is a meeting with the Bank of Japan with their monetary policy coming out on Wednesday. In this policy, they're going to be talking about they're going to be talking about the yield curve control on the 10-year bond yields. And this was one of the things that this was the thing that caused this whole move down here, which is very impactful. One of the things they're going to be talking about within these 2 days is potentially either reversing it or abandoning yield curve control sort of completely. So if you don't sort of understand that, I've wrote a brief explanation on what happened the other day overnight in my session notes there that people can go and read. That's been posted up in Slack. But Tuesday and Wednesday are going to be very important days to watch. You can see here on Wednesday, we've got the actual release it's listed. There's nothing that says on here about Tuesday, but I know the meeting's going on Tuesday, so I don't know if they're discussed on Tuesday and then announcing everything on Wednesday, maybe. But even then, there's no time set on this here, so it's going to be sort of very important to keep an eye on that sort of early to midweek. Other than that, let's see, get my notes. I think that's pretty much everything on my outlook. I like to sort of keep my outlooks as short as possible because no one needs to sort of listen to me for any longer than they need to. So, does anyone have any thoughts on that, or any thoughts in general? Any discussion points? That's my sort of what I'm looking at going into this week.
No, I think it was a good breakdown. I like how you've used the monthly resistance, to be honest, and you've drawn across from that, and then you've gone through the time frames and spotted it.
Sweet.
I think that's really good. I really like that. It's definitely, and it explains why we stopped exactly where we stopped.
Yeah.
Rather than, because originally I was looking at it as weekly resistances, which I agree are probably impactful, but seeing you draw that monthly and then seeing where prices rejected from, that's pretty good. I really like that.
Sweet. Yeah, I think I'll stop the recording then, unless anyone has anything else to say. Leave it at that. Sweet. Cheers. Speak to everyone soon.